beautiful friends, it's Amanda here and Happy New Year. It's my first video of 2019. As you can see, I have a new setup, so my background looks different. Still in the same room. It's all still the same makeup. It's just in a different order now. I've got some new lighting, so I hope it looks okay. I have new editing software, so hopefully I can learn how to use that. Lots of good changes happening this year. I'm really excited, but today we're talking about yet another brand new collection from ColourPop Cosmetics. This is the third collaboration between ColourPop and Karen, also known as Iluvsarahii. I think I'm saying that right. Sorry if I butcher your name. You never see my video, but sorry anyway. Sorry to your fans who watch this. This collection includes the Through My Eyes palette as well as 3 lip products. So I'm going to give you the rundown on everything. I'll be doing swatches, I'll be doing comparisons. I'll also do a quick little tutorial since I am wearing the Through My Eyes palette on my eyes today. Let's start with the lips first. There are 3 different lip colors in this collection. 2 are ultra mattes and 1 is an ultra glossy. The ultra matte shades are priced at $6.50 a piece and the gloss is $6 each, or you can buy these all together in a bundle and the lip bundle, all 3 shades, is $16. The ultra matte shades have their standard small doe foot applicator and the gloss has the little tiny brush applicator. I'm going to go ahead and show you the lip swatches now, and then I'll do a couple of comparison swatches, then we'll jump into the palette. Now I'm going to show you some comparison swatches between these new Karen shades and some existing ColourPop shades. I'm not going to do any comparison swatches for the gloss. Gloss swatches don't really do much for me. At the end of the day, most glosses end up just looking the same. Either they're shiny or they're glittery. This is just a gloss with gold glitter in it, so here are some swatch comparisons between some existing ColourPop shades. This is Karen's shade. It's an ultra matte and it's called Sueño de Coco. The first shade here is another collaboration with Kathleen Lights. This is Aquarius 2. Next we have the shade Strip. I think this is the most similar. It's just a bit more rosy than Karen's shade, but pretty similar in tone. Karen's is a little bit more brown. This is a little bit more rosy, but pretty close. And lastly, we have the shade Screenshot. And you can see this one's a little bit more of a peachy color, pinky peach, in comparison to Sueño de Coco. Now we're looking at Karen's shade Dulcet, and I'm comparing that to 2 different ultra matte lips. This is the shade Yes Is More. These are very, very close. I wouldn't say they are exactly the same shade. I think Dulcet has a little bit more of an orangey, toasty orange base, and this one is a little bit more of a raspberry, but pretty close. And as the shade dries, it looks even less similar than I thought it would. This is the shade Bumble. It's quite a bit darker. Same color family though. Now let's talk about the palette. This palette is priced at $23. The outer carton has these really cool, kind of creepy, kind of beautiful eyeballs all over it. And then the shade names are printed on the back. Then the Through My Eyes palette itself is a square. It's a 16 pan palette instead of their usual 12 pan. It's got this cool kaleidoscope inspired kind of print on the outside. Again, shade names are printed on the back as well as inside next to the shadows. You know I love that. There is a nice big mirror in here and that does fold all the way back. That's a feature that I enjoy. Personal preference, I guess. Taking a look at the shades inside here, we see 7 true mattes. This light peachy shade is sort of a satin with micro glitters, and this shade is a matte with some big old chunks of glitter in there, and then the rest are shimmers. The shimmers are quite varied. Some of them are the bright, smooth, really intense metallics that we're used to seeing. These two shades, Mesmerize and Flex, both have more sheer coverage, but they're sort of a shimmering, shifting topper type of shade. Definitely a cool concept in a palette like this. If you've ever used the single shadow from ColourPop in the shade Glass Bowl, or I think the other one is called Tea Garden, similar to that, it's more sheer wash of color, but it gives a really cool duochrome type of shift. So it's more of a transformative shade. Just that's how I'm gonna use it anyway. I'm gonna get into the palette swatches now. I will be swatching all 16 shades, one row at a time on the back of my hand. No primer down first. I will be doing finger and brush swatches. The finger swatches will be on top and then the brush swatches will be below. For my brush swatches, I'll be using my trusty e.l.f. flat eyeshadow brush, and I'll clean the brush off in between each shade using my Veramona color switch. Here are the swatches of the top row of the palette. Finger swatches are on top and brush swatches are below. First, we have a shimmering pale gold called Lucido. Next, a bright matte mustardy yellow called Wild Soul. A shimmering peachy goldy orange shade called Mesmerize. That was a great description. And a matte neutral tan shade called Sandalwood. Here's the second row of the palette. First up, we have that peachy matte shade with some micro glitters. This one's called In a Wink. Next, a matte orange called Euphoric. A warm brown shade with a bunch of silver glitter. This one's called Canela. And lastly, a shimmering pinky red. This one's called Lomo. We're on to the third row now. First, we have a shimmering bright green. This one's called Emerald Dream. Next, a beautiful, warm, shimmery gold. I know it sounds so basic, but I just love a shade like this. This one is Muse. Next, another shade I was really impressed by. This is a matte, deep eggplant called Divina. I've struggled with a lot of the purples in my ColourPop palettes before, and this one was surprisingly so smooth and even and just opaque, even with the brush. I was really pleased with this one. Lastly, this really glittery kind of shifting gunmetal shade. This one is called Flex. Last round of swatches, we're seeing mostly mattes down here. First is this really nice dusty rose shade. This one's called Nostalgia. Next, a beautiful deep green matte called Moody. A shimmering reddish burgundy shade. This one is Nocturne. And lastly, a red matte called Misbehave. Now let's take a look at some comparison swatches between the Through My Eyes palette, the Dream Street palette, and the Salvaje palette. As soon as photos of the inside of the Through My Eyes palette started popping up online, people immediately started drawing comparisons between this one and some of the other ColourPop collaboration palettes, Dream Street, which they did with Kathleen Lights, and the Salvaje palette, which they just released with Becky G. So I'm just showing you some quick finger swipe swatches just so that you can see the colors. The top swatches are the Through My Eyes palette, and then below are the closest shade matches from Dream Street and Salvaje. I can definitely see why these comparisons are being drawn, and there's no doubt that there are some similar shades in here, particularly those staple neutrally type shades, the tans and browns and bronze. We're also seeing some shades that are similar in color but have different finishes. For example, this bright corally red, this is called Spark in the Dream Street palette. This is a matte shade, and it's very similar in color to Lomo from Through My Eyes, but Lomo is a shimmer and Spark is matte. So while the color is super similar, they are doing different things. At least for me, I use mattes and shimmers really differently in my eye looks. I think another thing that's drawing a lot of comparison between these palettes is the fact that all three have these pops of blues or greens. In the Through My Eyes palette, these shades are definitely green, whereas in Dream Street and Salvaje, those shades are blues. It's sort of a similar thing happening here though. This really bright turquoise matte shade called Sirena from the Salvaje palette looks pretty similar shade-wise to this one called Emerald Dream from the Through My Eyes palette, but different finishes. At least for me, those shades are doing something different for me on the eye. Definitely no denying there are some shades that are pretty much going to give you the same eye look. If you tried, you could get the same eye look out of all three of these palettes, but I could say the same about probably 75 to, let's be real, like 90% of the palettes in my collection. Those same neutral brown, bronze, tan type of shades are going to be running throughout pretty much all of the palettes that I own. So if those are the shades that you're gravitating towards, then there's no point in having all of them. But if you're here for the color, the bright pop of color type of shades in this palette are definitely different. I love this mustardy matte shade. Those are the kind of shades I really, really like. Kind of reminds me of like a brighter version of the single shadow in Paper Tiger. Here's just a quick little swatch of Paper Tiger and then Wild Soul. You can tell these look pretty similar. Once they're swatched, you can tell the difference more. Paper Tiger is a little more muted. Wild Soul is a little bit brighter. All in all, definitely some overlap in shades here. Same can be said about any ColourPop palette or just any palette in general, in my opinion. I think Through My Eyes has a little bit more of like a bright, cheery, tropical vibe, whereas both Dream Street and Salvaje are a little bit more subtle, more subdued. I think it's just up to you how you feel about the shade overlap and what's gonna work for you and in your collection. Now that you've seen all of the swatches, let's jump into a quick tutorial using the Through My Eyes palette, and I will finally wrap up all my thoughts at the end. I'm starting off just like I always do with my favorite eye base. This is the MAC Paint Pot in the shade Painterly. Then I'm gonna set that base using some of my MAC Studio Water Weight pressed powder. Now it's time to get started on a transition shade. I'm using this rosy mauve shade called Nostalgia. Just applying that throughout the entire crease area using my favorite fluffy blending brush from ColourPop Cosmetics. I'm gonna get to work on the outer corner of the eye. I'm building up this shade called Divina with a small fluffy brush. And I did blend that with my finger just a little bit as well to make sure that it's nice and smooth. Next, I'm going to mix the shades Nostalgia and Misbehave on the same blending brush and work that in the outer part of my crease. For the lower lash line, I'm using this neutral tan shade called Sandalwood and just applying that along my entire lower lash line. Now I'm going to build up some color on my lid. I'm using this matte orange called Euphoric. I used a small flat brush to pack on Euphoric, and now I'm gonna go back over those matte shades on my lid. First using Nocturne on the outer part of my eye, Lucido applied to the inner corner. This is a beautiful inner corner highlight shade. And lastly, I'm topping everything off with this orangey gold called Mesmerize, just tapped over all the colors using my finger. Then I curled my lashes and added some of my NARS Climax mascara. And that's my finished look. I love how this turned out. It's bright, it's fun, festive, warm, toasty, sparkly, all of the good adjectives that I want on my eyeballs. Overall, I'm pleased with this palette. I'm not gonna bump it to the top of my list of absolute must-have favorite ever palettes, but I've enjoyed using it. I like that there's a wide variety of shades, different kinds of finishes. Overall, the palette seems pretty on par with my other ColourPop palettes. The shade called Lomo is quite gritty to the touch. It's definitely something I would recommend applying with a finger and not with a brush. I've had quite a bit of fallout with that one, and while it does look beautiful on, it takes a little bit more work. Where I think this palette really shines is the bottom 2 rows. I was very impressed with these deeper shades that are typically a little bit more tricky, something like a really deep green or the super deep dark eggplant shade, especially when they come in a matte formula. I've found that those type of shades tend to be a little bit tricky, a little bit patchy, and these have just felt so smooth and blended so nicely. I was really impressed by those. I think the shade range in here is really fun. I get sort of like a tropical vacation vibe from it, but since I mentioned that the bottom 2 rows were my favorite shades to use performance-wise, swatch-wise, the bottom 2 rows are really the heart of this palette. I noticed that if you cover up the top part and you just look at these shades here, something really good starts happening. I would have loved to see just these 8 shades as this palette. They just released the 8-pan palettes with Bretman Rock. I really like that smaller size. As a whole, I enjoy the shades in this palette. I like warm, bright orange, yellow, red, but I think that's where people are sort of getting fed up with the repetition. And when you just look at these 8 shades together, it seems really different for ColourPop. It seems a lot more sultry and kind of sexy, and I just think these are the best performing shades in the palette anyway. I don't have anything against these more bright orangey yellowy shades, but I think this really would have gotten a different reaction from the public if it was just these 8 shades as the palette. When you look at just the top 8 shades, it kind of looks like the Yes Please palette to me. Just saying. I like the palette. I will definitely use it. I'm glad that I have it in my collection. I think it would have benefited from being a smaller palette. I think it's fun. I think a lot of great looks are gonna come out of it. And especially if you don't have the Salvaje or the Dream Street palettes, then this may be the way to go for you because you are getting so many shades. I also wanted to mention that you can get the entire collection, the palette and all 3 lips, in a set for $39, or you can get the PR box. I think it's still in stock, at least at the time that I checked right before filming this video. And the PR box comes with all the cool little extra stuff plus the fancy packaging, and that's $50. The lip shades are really pretty. I like the colors. I'm just not a fan of the ultra matte lips. They're a little bit too dry and just not quite as comfortable as I prefer my liquid lipsticks to be. So I like the shades. I actually like all 3 of the shades in here, but glittery glosses and the ultra matte lips just aren't really my cup of tea, so I much prefer the palette in this collection. The packaging is pretty, it comes with a mirror. I like the shades. If you're over it or if you think it's too similar to other palettes that you have, then fair enough. I mean, I see where you're coming from on that. But there's just something about these bottom 2 rows that just really does it for me. You know what I'm saying? Now's the time when I want to hear what you think about these products. Which pieces are your favorites? Do you think the palettes are too similar? Yes, no? Let's start a discussion down in the comments because I always love to hear what you guys think about things. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye. I just love filming when my family's home. Not so much. I love them. They're just loud. Am I in focus? I don't know why I'm eating this. This is like the one palette I have that doesn't smell good. I mean, it doesn't smell bad. It just doesn't smell like food. It smells like a Payless shoe store. Yep, that's what it smells like. Oddly specific. It's been a while since I filmed. It's been like almost 2 weeks since I filmed. I know I was posting that whole time, but I just pre-filmed a bunch of stuff so I could take a break for the holidays. And now I don't know what to do with myself. Besides just wear tons of really glittery red eyeshadow. I got that part covered. Wow. Wow. Just wow. Here's to being even more awkward in 2019. I wore my evil eye earrings Since this collection is like through my eyes, I thought like eyeballs. It's fine. We'll just move on. What do you guys think of the new setup? Hopefully you like it because it took me hours to move everything around and I'm not moving it back, so you're just gonna have to learn to live with it. I just put this on and it's already like This one is Dulcet. Dulcet or Dulcet not? Wow, I'm gonna stop now. I promise, I'm stopping. Topper short shade. Nailed it. Let's get into it. It's been far too long since I swatched a palette. I can't go a week without swatching a palette, okay? Need my fix. Who? Into a quick tutorial. Welcome to my tutorial. Dang it. Why was that the most awkward thing I've ever said? It's definitely not. I've said way more awkward things. Okay, moving on.